entrance.
Sorry, Marina, I think that was an automatic.
Okay, that's right. I thought that what I said before was not a record.
No, do carry on.
Yeah, framing the entrance and reducing the extent of the yellow framing elsewhere on the elevations, the entrance becomes distinctive and legible. Elevations retain some of the yellow framing, providing a contrast to the dark gray cladding. Different cladding materials are used in the building to add a secondary layer of the architectural interest. Having reviewed this recommended design, and officers consider that application has addressed the design comments. Sorry, my screen just frozen. Oh, okay. The proposed landscape scheme includes hedges and tree planting on the University Way frontage. From this slide, you can see some trees proposed are fall outside the red line of the site. So officers consider it necessary to secure the tree planting and the paving outside the red line boundary through a Section 106 agreement. Landscaping conditions are also attached to the planning consent, securing the details of the proposed landscaping scheme to be approved and implemented before the occupation of the development. At this stage, there is no master plan guiding the development of the UTC campus. Nevertheless, the new building will act as a transitional route between the two different adjacent sites and will ensure there is a purposeful and distinct part of the overall dockside development. In summary, the overall design quality is considered to be acceptable subject to conditions and Section 106 agreement. The development would result in an increase to the floor area for the UTC. However, there will be no increase in the number of the students and the staff attending the facilities, and the program of the classes will remain consistent. Therefore, there will be no change to the level of trip generation when compared with the existing operations. The campus currently has one existing accessible parking space subject to the extant planning consent, and also has an existing cycle story capable of 46 cycle spaces. The proposal would provide no new car parking spaces, which is also secured by Section 106 agreement under this application. Conditions are also imposed, requesting cycle parking details to be approved if demands are increased. This slide shows the scope of the head of terms, which include a car-free development and associated parking permit restriction charges and associated travel plan monetary fee, and highway works to include tree planting and adjacent paving. And just to make pointed out, the application actually is a minor development. Because it exceeds the threshold of 250 square meter under educational use as set out for the community delegations. That is the reason it's been presented to the committee today. However, in terms of head of term, employment contribution and carbon offset contribution do not apply to this application because it's a minor development. Strategic Development Committee is asked to resolve to agree the reasons for approval as set out in the committee report. Delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission, subject to the completion of a legal agreement under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 as amended, based on the head of term identified at Appendix 2 of the committee report and the conditions listed in the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, did you have questions or comments? I just had a couple that I wanted to ask. I was keen to hear from the applicants. I noticed that you decided not to go down the route of the PPPA, pre-planning project application route, which would involve going to our design review panel as well. I wondered why you'd chosen not to do that.
I need to go to the speaker.
As long as you speak up so the speaker catches your voice, that should be okay.
If we were able to, we would like to proceed down the DRP route. We had to sort of make this application process as streamlined as possible in order to secure the funding for this project, which we can go into sort of a bit more detail if you'd like us to. But that's essentially the reason we were unable to in the PPA process.
Okay. I mean, I did just want to raise it because obviously we do depend greatly on our design review panel to give us that kind of really detailed information about design and making sure, perhaps particularly with educational establishments, that the fabric of the building is contributing to the kind of aspirations that you want the young people to have about how much we value their education.
I fully appreciate that. And yeah, I think it's also pertinent to know that we had 2 sort of rounds of pre-application with design officers where it was discussed in detail. We've worked collaboratively with design officers to iron out any queries or questions they've had in relation to design. It's also worth noting that the existing UTC building, that was subject to a DRP as well. And we've drawn upon a lot of the design principles on that one into this proposal. So, yeah.
That's good to know. Thank you. I see we're joined by Ben Hull, who's our LBN design officer. In the absence of the DRP process, Ben, are you able to reassure the committee in terms of the quality of design and architecture?
Hi, good evening. Yeah. So I've been involved in the scheme at pre-application stage and then at application stage, and we, as you suggested, we did encourage the applicant to go down the DRP route because we see the added value it brings. But at the same time, it is a lot smaller than most of the schemes that are presented to the panel, so it felt reasonable to progress at officer level, providing design input. I think we're comfortable with the scale of development, the materiality that draws on the existing UTC building. Really, we were just keen to impress on the importance of kind of looking beyond the extent of the red line to pick up landscaping and public realm improvements and some minor sort of refinements to the design and detailing, particularly about kind of highlighting the entrance and making sure it has a kind of positive relationship across the square with the existing entrance. So I think, yeah, we're comfortable that the scheme is of an acceptable design quality.
That's good to know. Thank you. And that actually links to another question of mine, which was, I noted that there have been some questions about the quality of the landscaping. And I'm not sure whether this is a question for you, Ben, or for Marina, about whether you're confident that the condition around the landscaping just helps to capture that and make sure that we're going to get what we need out of it.
I'm confident that that captures the detail. I think it was about making sure that the paving from the forecourt was extended along the southern boundary, to the street along the southern boundary, and making sure there was space for new street tree planting along the edge of the road. So I'm confident that that can be secured via the section 106.
Great, thank you. Just one more brief question from me, and this is for the applicant. I understand that the new building is proposed in order to provide workshop space for T-level qualifications, but that you're not proposing an increase in pupil numbers, is that right?
Yeah.
That means reallocating the numbers that you currently hold in order to accommodate the new qualifications, or how does that work?
Now, what it means is that we're able to deliver the new T-level qualifications, which are expanded technical qualifications, which have a lot more technical equipment. And at the moment, we don't have enough space to be able to do that. So what this is now going to do is allow more of our learners to do those technical qualifications than we've currently got.
That's really useful. Thank you. I don't think I have any more questions. Are members content for us to move to the vote? Thank you. Could you share the officer recommendation, please?
Sure.
Thank you. So we're asked to agree the reasons for approval as set out in the report and delegate authority, etc. Can I ask those in favour to please show their hands? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much for coming, and we look forward to seeing the development happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're making good progress tonight. We only have one more substantive planning item and then also our developer contributions paper. Can I suggest we just take maybe a 5-minute comfort break if members are content with that? Then we can reconvene at 19:16 to get through the last couple of items.
We slowly went through.
Optimization, so these
In fact, I can see the empty table.
and
Here we go.
that's sums of.
Clive Chapman, are you still with us on Zoom?
Yes, I am. Good evening.
Great, hello. If everyone's ready in the hall, I think I'm going to suggest that we move back into public session.
Councillor Verdi? Councillor Verdi, we're just going back into public session. Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, Deputy Chair. On the night whip. Oh.
Are we back online, Shirley? Thank you. Welcome back after that short break. The substantive planning item left on our agenda is item 8, excuse me, which is Berkeley Hall, 156B Green Street. Councillor Verdi, did you want to declare an interest for this?
Yes, I do. Just to say that I'm a resident of Green Street, Westbourne.
Thank you. We'll make sure that the minutes reflect that. Clive Chapman, I believe you're here on behalf of the applicant. Did you wish to address the committee for up to 5 minutes, or are you content to take questions?
I'm just content to take questions, just here to hear any there might be.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. In which case, we will move on to the officer report from Joe, please.
Sorry, I'll just share my screen and then. Can that be seen there?
Yes, we can see that now. Thank you.
So thank you, Chair. So item 8 relates to, as you said, Berkeley Hall at 156B Green Street, Forest Gate, and the application reference number is 24-01493-4. So the site is located on the northwest corner of Green Street and St George's Road. Green Street acts as a key movement corridor with the town centre located further south and commercial uses extending north. A public bus stop is located at the front of the site. This slide shows the existing locally listed building on the corner of St George's Road and Green Street. The site currently is occupied by Part 3 and Part 4-storey detached building, an associated courtyard where the extension would be placed. The tenants of the building are London Churchill College, who provide education for students aged over 16, with a focus on courses related to healthcare and social care, business and events management. The surrounding area is predominantly residential in nature, comprising mainly of terraced housing with some retail shops fronting Green Street. A 5-storey mixed-use development is located immediately to the west of the site on St George's Road. Commercial uses are on the ground floor of this development. So the proposal, the planning permission is for the demolition of the existing single-storey building and construction of 4-storey extension to the existing college. The proposal was previously approved at Strategic Development Committee on the 10th of April 2018 in relation to planning application number 17-038 full. The permission was subsequently lapsed without being implemented. The works were not implemented due to the building being re-regulated by the Office of Students, as well as impacts of COVID-19. This development has been brought forward again with the same design, construction and operational details. The application specifically seeks to provide an additional floor space for the existing college operated to accommodate increased demand. The proposed extension provides an additional 654 square metres of educational floor space, which would be used for teaching rooms, office area and reception with replacement kitchen and new refectory. In relation to the design, the extension will be 4-storey, including 3 stories plus roof level, within the area to the north that is currently occupied by a single-storey canteen building, also sort of ancillary print room and a landscape access area. The extension would also project across the existing internal courtyard area created by the two wings of the host building. This slide shows again the side and rear elevation with the new extension in black. This slide shows an artist's impression of the proposal, which is considered to successfully integrate within the streetscape, further activating the frontage and providing passive surveillance. In the assessment of the previously approved application, the proposal was assessed against the London plan that was draft for public consultation and the draft local plan, which was submitted to the Secretary in February 2018. The draft local plan was given material weight in the original assessment and was subsequently adopted in December 2018. Whilst updates to these policies were made, the overall policy context has remained the same. Where updates have been made, the proposal has been appropriately assessed by officers. In regards to the principle of development, the proposal continues to accord with the requirements for the expansion of an existing facility. The policy context has not changed. The policy requirements under INF 8 were previously assessed and were deemed acceptable. This previous assessment outlined that the proposal would be identified for local need, being for the benefit of Newham residents, with an estimated 80 to 90% of users being from Newham. The location being connected to public transport, including within walking distance to Green Street Town Centre. The extension activates the frontage and is well designed, which interacts positively with the street scene, and it's inclusive. The development will be available to all members of the local community when not being used as an educational facility. Therefore, like the previous application, the principle of development is supported. During the application, officers reviewed the design, which was previously deemed acceptable, and considered this to continue to be the case. With the imposition of conditions, officers considered the design and scale of the extension will continue to be acceptable with the local context, and will preserve the significance of the locally listed building, which the proposal has achieved. Like the previous application, conditions in relation to secured by design and appropriate material quality have been included. Officers consider the proposal would infill the currently vacant frontage to Green Street, providing a positive design improvement which is integrated into the street scene and surrounding built form. The assessment in relation to neighbouring amenity under the previous approval continues to be relevant. Where changes to the neighbouring context and policy have occurred, officers have provided further assessment. It's noted only one planning permission has been approved in the surrounding area since the previous approval, and this was on the neighbouring mixed-use site. However, this is for a minor rear commercial extension and no impacts would occur. In relation to daylight and sunlight, an addendum has been provided by the original author to the Daylight and Sunlight Report, which considers current BRE standards. This has not changed the outcome of the original assessment. Whilst there are minor impacts were noted, these were deemed acceptable. Furthermore, during public consultation of the current application, no representations were received from neighbouring residential properties or from the general public more widely. In addition, all consultees have demonstrated support for the proposal. Environmental health officers have not raised any objections, subject to conditions. The Newham Transportation Team recommended a draft construction logistics plan to mitigate impacts to neighbouring properties during construction, which was provided by the applicant during the assessment of this current application. Therefore, the proposal continues to be supported in relation to impacts to neighbouring amenity, subject to compliance with the recommended conditions. Like the previous approval, a condition requiring the submission of a travel plan has been included. In addition to this, Newham's transportation team outlined the need to secure a monitoring fee and measures contribution in line with Council's 2023 travel plan guidance. Heads of terms have been drafted for this Section 106 agreement, which can be found in Appendix 2. All other matters of consideration continue to be acceptable. The applicant has provided updated documentation reflective of current policy requirements. The proposal will increase biodiversity through a green roof and achieves a BREEAM standard of very good, with a condition recommended to secure this. Therefore, the Strategic Development Committee is asked to resolve to 1. Agree the reasons for approval as set out in this report, and 2. Delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission subject to the completion of the legal agreement and all other enabling powers based on the heads of terms at Appendix 2 and conditions listed in Appendix 1.
Thank you.
Thank you, and happy to answer your question.
Thank you very much. Before we proceed, it occurs to me for completeness that I should probably declare a site visit that took place to this site in early 2018, which I was part of. It did pertain to the previous application, but nevertheless, I did go to the site and have a look round, and obviously the application is still the same. Can I ask members, please, if they have any questions or comments? Councillor Masters.
I'm quite interested in a comment made in the report, page 143, 7.3.7, where it states, based on the information submitted, officers are satisfied that the existing operators use broadly accords with the site's established lawful use. Is there a level of risk in this? I'm just wondering if you can unpack that particular sentence for me. And I've got another couple of questions.
Starting point. I'm happy to answer that one. So again, the starting point for this was with that previous approval was in place. And from our perspective, we assessed that previous assessment report and then noted that it considered sort of current policy that was in draft format, but still held weight. So I would note that part of the updated report is based on that previous assessment report. In terms of that, your comment around broadly, again, that was sort of reflective of previous assessment. Now, the site continues to operate as the Churchill College with the same use. And I think in terms of that, sort of the sentence around that, it does go on to talk about the print room that is in place there, sort of servicing the college, which was considered sort of an ancillary use to the current F1 educational use. So I think sort of that relates to the more broad assessment of where the extension would take place in what currently is occupied in it by an ancillary use.
Okay, so then my second question is, I'm just interested in looking at this increase in student numbers from 200 to 450. Whether, and this is probably a question for the applicant, whether they work with our local authority, Health and Adult Social Care Directorate, to align with local needs, given that much of their work is developing what sounds like local people in those very, very key areas.
I'm aware that the person who's here from the applicant is from the architects. Are you able
Yes.
to address that query for us?
I'm not, I'm afraid. I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that question.
I mean, I can only say that in 2018, they talked very convincingly about links with local employers, but perhaps we could perhaps we could take that away, and then we can ask local ward councillors to pick that up.
My final question's a hell of a lot easier, and I'm sure you can answer this one. Can we be assured that this development will now go ahead, given the previous delays, if we grant permission tonight?
It's certainly very much the intention to do so, yes.
I had a question which also relates to that about the increase in numbers, which again, we're on page 144, paragraph 7.3.10, which says that the proposal would result in a relatively moderate increase in floor space, but the applicant has indicated an aspiration to increase the capacity of the facility from 200 students to 450. Obviously, on the face of it, there's a lot that's positive about that, about additional training for people who sound primarily to be Newham residents in areas where, you know, there is definitely a need. But I wondered whether from a sort of design and architectural point of view, you were able to reassure us about the quality of the education and the quality of the experience if the site is being used so much more intensively than it is at the moment.
Yes, I mean, we certainly have been discussed. We didn't design, I have to say, we didn't design this building. We picked this scheme up from the previous architects. But obviously we've been discussing it with the applicant. And yes, I think obviously there's not going to be 450 people there at any one time. You know, it's the space is going to be used at different periods of different days at different times. And certainly they feel that that's their aspiration.
I mean, I noted that there aren't currently numbers restrictions in terms of the planning permission, so this isn't necessarily a planning lever that we can pull, but it's nevertheless reassuring to hear you say that it's not as if the site would become overcrowded in a way that would be unpleasant, or at least that's if I understand you correctly.
And certainly, and they do have other premises as well nearby, so it isn't as if this is their only building used. So it isn't as if they can't accommodate with alternative accommodation nearby. They have two other campuses.
That's good to know, thank you. The final comment that I had is one which is actually pretty comprehensively dealt with in the committee report, but I wanted to say it anyway in case of anyone who was watching or who, for whatever reason, hasn't read the entire report. Obviously, the building itself is locally listed and it has quite a lot of really attractive architectural details. And I wondered how certain you felt, Joe, from an officer point of view, that the extension was really respecting that and enhancing it and wouldn't be detracting from it in any way.
Yeah, so obviously it was reviewed in the original submission twice by L&B Urban Design and Conservation, and they were fully supportive of the application. In assessing sort of locally listed buildings, some of the key criteria is, does it preserve and enhance the appearance and character of the building? I think the current one-story extension, it doesn't sort of complement what's currently on site. And I think by using materiality that is in keeping with the current building enhances that. And then also sort of a second point that should be considered is retaining any features of historic interest. Again, the extensions to the side of the existing building. So we're not looking at sort of any substantive impacts to the detailing of what's currently on site. And then, as I've just said, the sort of third point is use appropriate materials. And again, the intention is to use materials that match what's existing on site, and that's been secured by a condition that samples will have to be produced to council and signed off by our urban design and conservation team.
And that producing the samples, the condition around that will presumably safeguard the quality of the materials against any kind of value engineering that might happen. Not suggesting, Mr. Chapman, that you would be involved in that, but just that we have to set up safeguards to make sure it doesn't happen generally.
No, absolutely, we'd support that. And, you know, if it's felt necessary to condition some details too on the facade, you know, the idea is the building complements the local BTM and not competes with it. And, you know, certainly if the details of the cut arches or in any of the, you know, there's some corbelling shown, coping stones, that could easily be conditioned if it was felt appropriate.
Well, I think I'll leave the detail of that in the capable hands of our officers, but it's good to know that you're committed to that kind of detail, because that's what's going to deliver, we hope, a high quality building. If there aren't further questions or comments, then I'll suggest we move to the vote on this final planning item. Joe, could you share your screen again, please?
Sorry if I can work it out quickly. And you see that one?
Almost. There we go. So the Strategic Development Committee is asked to resolve to agree the reasons for approval as set out and delegate authority, etc. Can I ask for those in favour, please have a show of hands? And that is again unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes our main items of planning consideration on the agenda and brings us on to the final item, which is the Developer Contributions Annual Report.
Sorry for the delay.
And then you just go, yeah.
Yeah. Can you confirm that you can see? Oh, right. Everyone can see now.
Yes, that's displaying. Fine. Thank you. Whenever you're ready.
So item 10 on the agenda is the Developers Contributions Annual Report for 23-24. Me and my colleague Duncan will present. The next slide you will see is just a recommendation, which is to say that the Development Committee is asked to note the information relating to developers' contributions for the 23-24 financial year, the report on compliance related to the airport, and the other information appended to this report. Moving to the next slide, developers' contributions. Very short note what the developers' contributions are. Members are aware with the content of the report, but as a short note, the developers' contributions capture both Section 106 agreements, which we heard in the last two items on the agenda, and the sale is the other regime, which is actually a tax on the development is non-negotiable. We have in Appendix 1, the statutory report is set out in Appendix 1 of the Strategic Development Committee and provides an overview of SIL and Section 106 activity during the reported year 23-24. Also, as an adherence to the provision of Airport Section 106 agreement, a report on the review of 2023 annual performance report is included in the report, and my colleague Duncan will take that element forward. Still matters. You will see here in this section that we've got an extraction from the report. This is table 1, which is summarize the main sale details, the key details from the sale. A total of 4 million of sale is being collected to the council during the reported year. Oh, apology. The next 3 columns captures the expenditure for 23-24. Projects like funding towards new access to Stratford Station via the Carpenters, from the Carpenters estate, Leeway Bridges, another project is Road Dock Corridor, a part of the expenditure from these 11 million you will see for the from the strategic sale, together with maintenance and funding applying towards the operation and maintenance of sport and leisure facilities. Other part here is the amount that's been spent on admin cost, and this is to keep us collecting still funding in the future. You will see, the members will know that it's 853 nearly it's spent for neighborhood sale and on projects on the neighborhood sale on projects, which is actually, it's in with the People Powered Places program. The council resident engagement team is responsible for the program, which actually facilitate the funds for the neighborhood sale. And these funds are being allocated to a total of 120 projects, which is being voted by Newham residents. And just the last 2 columns showing us how much is being moved forward from the reported year to 24-25. We've got total of 18 million of strategic sale, which is carried forward and can be spent on projects on our infrastructure list, including projects on our capital program. And also 5 million is retained on neighborhood sale and is carried forward for year. Just to note here that the sale regulations allow for some of the developments to apply for exemption and relief. And for the last year, we've got 6 claims, total of 4 million, which is actually it's relief from payment of that sale. And even if we are not going to collect this amount as a sale payment, it actually helps, for the provision of affordable housing and self building developments. Yeah. And the next one is the other part of the developers' contributions, which is the Section 106 agreement. Again, the same as the previous slide, you will see that we've got the extraction is the same as the table 2 of our report. And this is actually compounds the main issues and key issues with the Section 106 administration and monitoring. Secured, as you know, members, as the last 2 items on the agenda, they were subject to Section 106 recommendation and completion of an agreement. So once that agreement is completed, it will be part of the ones that's been secured through the reported year. So, through the year. So we've got 30 deeds that's been completed through the reported year. 7 of them are modifications on already approved schemes. One is the supplemental deed for unilateral undertakings, which is actually relates when the council is the owner, and the rest is the 18 agreements. The deeds, Section 106 agreements secure non-financial and financial obligations. In terms of the financial, we will see 3.8 being secured through the deeds, and this funding can be used for helping the infrastructure, but it can be used for a third party and any other projects. Just to note here on the secured, this funding is not sure to come. It just is subject if the consented scheme being approved subject to Section 106 are actually being implemented, and the triggers agreed within the Section 106 agreements are actually reached, that payment coming to the council, which is actually bringing to the next column. We'll see when it's being received. This is definitely where the point within the agreements being triggered for any financial payments to be made. The amount of 10 million received during the reported year combines a payments that's been secured through agreements during the reported year, but also combines a payment that's been secured in agreements in previous years. And actually, we reached the point where we can receive that payment. That 10 million that's been received to the council, it's the biggest amount that's being received is towards the affordable housing, our new homework, and the other part is for education provisions. And that brings to the next column, which is the spend of Section 106 planning contributions. Total of 10 million was spent on a project, a funded part or solely by Section 106 funds. The biggest spend comes to the projects like affordable homes for you, which we've got 3.3 million spent through the reported year. Another 2 biggest projects that occurred the expenditure within these 10 million is our new homework and highways and public realm. The last part that is in column 4 is the allocated funding. So during the 23-24, a total of 2.6 million of Section 106 contributions were allocated towards project we deliver infrastructure and also provide the benefits for the residents of Neom. Through our governance process, carbon offset contributions were allocated to urban foresting for Neom schools and communities pilot project, and the other project which also have an allocated Section 106 funding is Royal Victoria Gardens improvements. The more in details information on the projects, what we spent and what's been allocated through the reported here is included in the appendix 1 of the report and gives you more detailed information. And just on a final note on the developers' contribution, both Section 106 and SAIL. These contributions will continue to play a critical role in our future growth, and it's going to be, part of the planning process and to provide a funding towards infrastructure growth and benefits for the Neom. I will hand over to my colleague Duncan for the part of Appendix 2.
Yeah, next slide, please.
Yeah.
So just to reiterate about my report. So the annual performance report is required by the Section 106 agreement. It says that the airport need to produce this report annually, and equally the Section 106 report requires us to do this report to Strategic Development Committee. Obviously, it's quite unusual that developers have to come back or an operator has to come back sort of every year. That just highlights the level of scrutiny that we place on the airport as a big piece of infrastructure in the borough. The report is for noting and it covers the 2023 calendar year, so slightly different from the previous appendix. The airport reported themselves fully compliant with the various planning controls, planning conditions and Section 106 agreement, which is an overall conclusion that officers accept as set out in the report. Things. Okay, so in relation to operational statistics, so the airport reported approximately 3.4 million passengers during 2023 across about 51,000 movements. So that is still quite significantly below the pre-pandemic high, as well as the limits in the planning conditions themselves. One issue that was identified during the year is that a very sort of small discrepancy between the passenger numbers reported to Neom Council as planning authority and those reported to CAA. Essentially, all airports are required to report passenger numbers to the CAA, and that's sort of collated by them. However, it's a very small amount, about less than 1% of the reported number, and clearly, there is a lot of headroom underneath what's required by the condition. So this isn't a compliance issue. And the way we've sort of approached it is to always use the higher of the two figures to basically work out whether they're complying with it. And at the airport are continuing to look into the details of that. In terms of noise, there are sort of range of different noise controls, planning conditions and Section 106 agreements. I've just cut out some of the key ones. The airport are required to report their noise contours, which is essentially a graphical sort of representation of noise over the borough, using a sort of methodology that was agreed with the council. So the 57 dB noise contour, I won't go into too much of the technical details because obviously that's not quite my field, that's more of the noise and pollution team measure, but the area is still quite a long way underneath the 9.1 square kilometres that they can reach. And in terms of the QC figure, which is basically a count of the noise from all the aircraft using the airport sort of across the whole year, that's also below the limit in the planning conditions and predicted to reduce very slightly in 2024, so this year. The airport continued to operate their sound insulation scheme. However, the number of new installations is almost a trickle now. Basically, the eligibility for the sound insulation scheme is based on the noise contours. And since 2019, the noise contours haven't increased in size. And therefore, the only sort of new installations being done now is where, you know, you've had a change of ownership. Someone's realised that they can get this insulation and they've gone back to the airport and asked for it. We are now seeing the re-inspection activity starting to ramp up. So basically, after you get your sound insulation done, the airport will contact you and say, you know, you can have someone come and check that the vents are still working, the windows don't need any work. And so that activity is now increasing. And then we also note in the report that there was a issue to do with some listed buildings in Tower Hamlets, which was discussed last year. And it was a slightly long-running process to get sound insulation done for those properties, because they are listed buildings, and therefore the airport had to get permission, had to do a pre-app, and that did sort of drag on to some extent, but pleased to report that the installations were finished, albeit in 2024, so just outside of the year. In terms of air quality, equally as the report identifies, there are sort of a range of different controls and sort of monitoring activities that the airport need to do. They have monitors which report live on the website, which has sort of range of different particulates, and there's a report alongside their annual performance report by their air quality consultants, where they report against the various national air quality standards and regulations, so annual means, 24-hour means, and they didn't find any instances where those sort of targets were exceeded. And the report produced by air quality consultants to the airport identified specifically significant downward trend for nitrogen dioxide and nitrogen oxides. That's some of the pollutants that they are required to monitor, and a downward trend for PM10, which is the fine particulate matter as well. And that does sort of reflect some of the monitoring that you see across London as a whole. So it's quite hard to say what's to do with the airport and what's to do with other sources, but that's something that's noted. And finally, on this issue, there has been a quite significant reduction in the number of environmental complaints. However, officers just make the point that there hasn't been a massive change in the airport's operations sort of from 2023 compared to previous years. It's more that there are a small number of serial complainants who have tended to do quite a lot of complaints, and more recently, some of those serial complainants have sort of reduced the number of complaints they've done. So that's why the complaints number has gone down, albeit we don't see that as being sort of showing a big change in the airport's operations. Finally, in terms of employment, so there was a slight decrease in the number of people employed on the airport sort of site overall. And that was mainly driven by a reduction in police and border force employment. So there have been sort of retirements and changes to their sort of operations. The airport's direct employment did increase slightly to 508 full-time equivalent. In terms of local recruitment, something that is often discussed at this forum, the airport are required to undertake reasonable endeavours to meet some recruitment targets which are set out in the Section 106 agreement, and the results are in Table 5 in the report. So the Section 106 agreement requires the airport to undertake reasonable endeavours to meet the targets. However, if there is sort of a, you know, if the target is not met, then that's not in itself a compliance issue. Rather, the airport would have to sort of not be undertaking those reasonable endeavours. So throughout the year, the airport have continued to work quite closely with our Newham work in terms of, you know, trying to bring forward some of the candidates that they work with into airport jobs. attending local job fairs, and another change that the airport made was to the working practices to some of the ramp roles. So people basically on the apron sort of directing the aircraft. They tried to create some part-time roles that might appeal to students, for example, perhaps at UEL, to kind of have like a part-time schedule that fitted in with their that would allow them to go to sort of the lectures as necessary. Table 6 and 7 show the modal split passenger staff respectively. So the table 6 data come from the CAA, who do monitoring of all airports in terms of surface access. So there has been an increase in DLR usage, which is positive. And in terms of staff travel, there has been a reduction of a 4 percentage point reduction of single occupancy car trips. So the airport does struggle to some extent with sustainable transport for staff, because obviously there is a lot of shift work, people starting shifts, sort of 6 o'clock in the morning, when public transport is not necessarily, a very easy option for those people. But the airport have been emphasising car share, and you can see an increase from 1 to 4% as a result of those efforts. Also a slight increase in usage as well, which is welcome. So yeah, just noting again the recommendation that the committee is asked to note the information relating contribution for 23-24 financial year, the report on the airport's new performance report, and the other information appended to the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, comments or questions? Councillor Marston.
Right, I've got a few questions. Only one on the SIL report, because, it is what it is. And that is, I'm just wondering what mayoral SIL is, this sort of 52 grand referenced on page 219. I've never heard this expression before.
The mayoral SIL. Thank you. Just to confirm, that's for the page
219 in the report.
As Newham as a collecting authority on the SIL, which is for mayoral SIL and Newham SIL, our charging schedule was it was 2040, just to make sure that I've got the dates right. And we also collect on behalf of the mayor. So that's the part that goes to the it's not to us, it's actually that's what we use in terms of mayoral SIL. And sorry that we're saying MSIL in the report is with that.
I don't understand how that differs from Newham SIL, because surely all the SIL comes to Newham. Newham is a mayoral authority.
I think it means the Mayor of London.
Oh, right. Sorry, that completely threw me.
It's just because we're so used to when we say mayoral SIL, we know that it's collected to, it's not for us, but for the,
Okay.
the mayor.
Yeah.
And my other questions are on London City Airport. So 2.39. I'm just interested in what the difference is between LBN residents and local area residents, and how we can be doing better on the employment of local residents, which is a 70% target, than LBN, which is only 50%. And then my final question is, I'm just interested in how much control the airport has over other jobs on site, because I'm assuming if they're leasing units to other organisations, retail units, that they wouldn't have control over that employment, or do they have a condition that they set to people leased areas within the airport?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, in terms of the local area versus Newham, so the footnote 18 sort of sets out the Section 106 agreement, explains which how we define the local area. So that basically, I think it's 13 boroughs, and it's kind of a larger area. So, you know.
So it's London, is it then?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, fine.
I can read out the list. It's
Makes sense.
Newham, Tower Hamlets, Hackney, Waltham Forest, Redbridge, Lewisham.
North East London.
Yeah, and then also Havering and Epping Forest District Council, which obviously does extend a long way into Essex. And that definition was written into the Section 106 agreement, sort of dating back to.
Okay, fine. That makes total sense then.
Just on the second point, the airport, what they have done is written into their concession and lease agreements, say Pret or whoever, that the leasee has to take on this obligation in terms of the reasonable endeavours to meet the targets. However, perhaps the airport, they could also come in on this point, but I think one of the issues that they can have is sometimes it's harder to get those separate organisations to put the same level of focus as the airport, and often some of the concessions will have like a London-wide recruitment, and therefore it's possibly harder for them to you know, like specifically encourage local employment in the same way. For example, Pret might just have one website that covers, you know, applicants from all across London. So that is an issue that the airport are sort of working on.
I had a question about the local recruitment as well, similarly about table 5, which you're right, we have spoken about before. And I guess having now sat on this planning committee for a while, I've seen like consistently the targets around local jobs not being met. It did seem to me that there had been a bit of a sea change in terms of the stats for 2022, which made me think that we might be kind of progressing towards meeting all of them. And it feels like things have dropped back a bit again in 23.
Yeah, I mean, the report, the APO and the report does pick up on this. One of the issues that in 2022, they were sort of ramping up their operations after COVID, and they needed a lot of recruitment to roles like security, passenger service, and the ramp staff. And those are the types of roles that you often do get a lot of local and new employment in. And this year, there hasn't been as much recruitment into those roles. Another issue is that in 2023, BA City Flyer, which is sort of accounts for quite a large proportion of the flights at the airport, they decided to close their base in Edinburgh. And so essentially people who had been working in that Edinburgh base might have transferred down to London, some pilots and cabin crew, and therefore they obviously would have been non-local.
It just, I guess the reason I keep coming back to it is obviously, as you know, like there are a number of disadvantages to having an airport in the borough around noise and pollution and environmental impact. And it does just seem particularly important to really make the most out of those economic benefits, particularly around like jobs, which aren't just the kind of lower level, lower paid jobs being available to Newham residents. I mean,
there has been a range of recruitment. There have also been some management and sort of environmental staff that I deal with regularly who have been local sort of recruits. But yeah, that's certainly noted.
I suppose it would just be helpful if you could maybe take that back in your liaison with the airport to say that obviously, you know, we do hear from this every year, but it continues to be really important to us as a committee about the economic benefits for Newham residents. Were there further comments? Harvinder.
On page 221 talks about the bus priority GR380, £131,000.
Page.
Page 221 or page 15 of 58.
Yeah, bus priority road, Docks Road.
That's right. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Right, this is one of the projects that's been allocated Section 106 funding, and it was from a development at Clubsgate Lane. Sorry, and overall, I don't have actually in front of me more details on the project, but it's one that's is going to be undertaken by Highways a team, and I'm pretty sure within the funding request there was a mentioning for further details, but I can get back that project.
So looking at that, would that be that it's part to do with the having a priority for the buses along that section of the road? Could be.
Apologies, I'm not quite sure because otherwise.
Take away an action.
Yeah.
If you could
Take that one,
please.
provide the details on that project.
Question is because is funding available for those kind of things? When we talk about public transport and community, there are certain things that we feel, or I feel, that there is a need and we are getting told there's no funding available.
And I guess that question of how the projects are identified and how funding is allocated towards them, it goes slightly outside the terms of this report, but it's nevertheless maybe something we could take away and we could talk about in more detail, perhaps at our next DCMF, which is the Development Control Members Forum. Were there further questions or comments?
No.
In which case, I'm going to suggest that we move to the recommendation here, which is that we note the report. And I assume that those are in favour, and if so, for the minutes, if we could raise our hands. Thank you, that is noted. The very final item on today's agenda is the date of the next meeting, which, goodness me, it's going to be a very festive meeting on the 17th of December. Thank you all for your time this evening, and I'll see you on the 17th, if not before.
Thank you. Thank you.
How to.
But you can just go.
Switched off.
Oh.
Not yet. I've got on the live stream. It's not recorded. I can't hotspot recording yet.